My name is Claire Mercer. I was 62 years old when my parents invited me to Sunday dinner and announced that they had given my home to my younger brother. My mother slid a brass house key across the dining table toward Jason and said, "Your father and I signed everything Friday. The Maple Street house is yours now." Jason closed his fingers around the key I had carried for 13 years. Then my father handed me a notice giving me 30 days to leave the house where I had paid the taxes, replaced the furnace, repaired the roof, and cared for them after surgeries. Jason needed it as collateral for a business loan. I did not argue. I folded the notice, placed it beside my plate, and asked one question. "Did you read the trust before you signed the deed?" My father looked away. Jason smiled and said their lawyer had handled it. That was not true. 3 weeks later, one sentence from a 16-page trust stopped Jason's loan and exposed a plan that had begun months before dinner. If you have ever been told that peace requires surrender, stay with me. My family had mistaken silence for the absence of records, the role I had always played. I grew up in Worthington, Ohio, in the same red brick house on Maple Street that my parents later tried to take from me. My father, Robert, was a residential contractor. My mother, Elaine, taught 3rd grade until she retired. Jason was 5 years younger than I was, charming from the beginning and gifted at making his emergencies sound like opportunities for everyone else. In our family, Jason was described as ambitious. I was described as dependable. Those words sounded equal when I was young. They were not. Jason could quit a job because a manager didn't understand his potential, while I drove across town to solve the next emergency. My parents invested $8,000 in his first company. I rebuilt its books after he lost the receipts. When it closed, my mother called it valuable experience. I became a records supervisor in the Franklin County Recorder's office. It was not glamorous work, but I liked facts that stayed where they were placed. Deeds had dates. Mortgages had release numbers. A signature either appeared or it did not. I spent 34 years teaching younger clerks that recording a document did not prove it was valid. It only proved someone had presented it for recording. That distinction would eventually save my home. At 38, I married a quiet electrical engineer named Mark. We had one pregnancy that ended in the 5th month and no children after that. Mark died of pancreatic cancer 9 years later. The year following his death, I moved back into the Maple Street house because my parents were struggling with the mortgage. And because I had forgotten how to live in rooms where nobody expected me. They did not ask me to pay rent. They asked for help. The house was already behind on 2 mortgage payments. My father's contracting income had declined after a shoulder injury, and my mother had used most of their emergency savings to help Jason open a kitchen remodeling showroom in Dublin. I paid the arrears, then refinanced a small investment account and put $68,000 toward the remaining principal. I never asked to be added to the deed. At the time, asking would have felt like charging admission to my own family. That was my emotional weakness. I confused usefulness with belonging. For the next decade, I handled almost everything that arrived in an envelope. Property taxes, insurance, renewals, utility disputes, Medicare forms, contractor estimates. When my father needed a hip replacement, I converted the downstairs den into a bedroom. When my mother had cataract surgery, I took 3 weeks of accumulated leave and drove her to every appointment. Jason visited with pastries and stories. I changed dressings and balanced accounts. Jason was not entirely selfish. He called our parents, remembered birthdays, and could make my father laugh through pain. But he had built his life around the belief that somebody else would absorb the cost of his choices. Usually, that somebody was me. His daughter, Hannah, saw it before I did. At 29, she was a physical therapist with her father's easy smile and none of his entitlement. She had spent summers at Maple Street helping me paint the porch and sort the basement. After I paid $1,400 to stop Jason's truck from being repossessed, Hannah said, "You make it too easy for them." I told her families helped one another. She answered, "Helping is supposed to have an end." The trust was created in 2018 after my father's second hospitalization. An elder law attorney named Rebecca Shaw met with all four of us in the Maple Street dining room. Jason arrived late and left early. I stayed for every page. My parents wanted to protect the house and decide what would happen if they moved into assisted living. Because I had paid down the mortgage and maintained the property, Rebecca proposed an irrevocable residence trust. Once my parents permanently moved out, I would have exclusive lifetime occupancy if I paid taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Jason would receive the property after my death or voluntary departure. My mother hesitated. "Why should Claire get it first?" she asked. Rebecca answered calmly. "Because Claire contributed substantially to preserving the residence, and because you have said you want her housing protected. Jason receives the remainder. He is not disinherited." My father nodded. "That's fair." Jason skimmed the summary and said, "Fine by me. I don't want to live here anyway." I did not realize then how much could change when a house became more valuable. The trust included one provision Rebecca read aloud twice. She called it the consent protection. Any amendment, transfer, mortgage, or encumbrance affecting my occupancy interest required my prior written consent. Not a conversation. Not a family vote. Written consent. My mother asked whether that gave me control over their property. "No," Rebecca said. "It prevents anyone from promising Claire lifetime occupancy and later removing it without her agreement. You are creating a protected beneficial interest." I signed an acknowledgement that I understood my obligations. My parents signed the trust. Jason signed as a remainder beneficiary. Rebecca placed the original in a dark green binder and gave each of us a copy. The house key I carried was still just a key then. Brass, slightly bent near the teeth, with a blue plastic tag. My father had written on in black marker, "Maple." When my parents moved to a Westerville condominium in 2024, the provision activated. I paid the $6,184. Annual taxes, $2,360 insurance, and a $9,700 furnace replacement from my own accounts. I kept every receipt. My parents seemed relieved. My father said the house had become too much for them. My mother said she was glad I would keep the garden alive. Jason joked that I had finally become the lady of the manor. For almost a year, nothing changed. Then Jason's remodeling business began to fail. He had opened a second showroom with borrowed money. Clients delayed payments, a supplier sued, and his bank reduced his credit line. He needed collateral to refinance roughly $310,000 in business debt. The Maple Street house, which had been worth about $240,000 when the trust was signed, had recently appraised near $465,000. That number changed the way my family looked at the home. I noticed it first in small remarks. My mother asked why I needed 3 bedrooms. Jason suggested I move into a condo before maintenance gets harder. My father asked whether the trust could be adjusted so Jason could borrow against his future share. I answered honestly. Not without my written consent, and I'm not risking the house for business debt. My mother frowned. You make everything sound so final. It is final if the loan goes bad. Jason called the following evening. I'm not asking you to give me the house, he said. I only need the equity temporarily. There is no temporary mortgage if the payments stop. You think I'm going to lose it? I think your company is already in trouble. He went quiet. Then he said, You've always wanted to believe I can't manage without you. The accusation worked because part of me feared it was true. I offered to review his numbers and build a payment plan. He refused. I don't need a county clerk auditing me, he said. I need my family to believe in me. That was the first time he called the trust unfair. The betrayal they thought I would accept. The Sunday dinner was scheduled for April 13th. My mother said she wanted everyone together because my father had been tired lately. I brought roasted carrots and a lemon cake. Hannah arrived 10 minutes after me and whispered that Jason had been at the condominium all afternoon with a mobile notary. I asked why. She shook her head. He wouldn't tell me. My parents' dining table was smaller than the one at Maple Street, but my mother had arranged it with the same wedding china. Jason wore a navy sport coat. He dressed formally only when he wanted a moment to feel official. Conversation stayed ordinary through dinner. My father complained about the condo association. My mother described a neighbor's surgery. Jason talked about a commercial project he claimed would reset everything for his company. Then, before dessert, my mother said, We have made a family decision. I looked at Hannah. She stopped lifting her water glass. My father placed his napkin beside his plate. He would not meet my eyes. My mother continued. The Maple Street property needs to serve the family as a whole, not one person. Jason has an opportunity that can protect all of us financially. We signed the house over to him Friday. Jason reached into his pocket and placed the brass key on the table. My spare key had been in a bowl near the back door. He had entered while I was away, taken it, and treated possession as proof of ownership. Where did you get that? I asked. Mom gave it to me. My mother said, It belonged to us before it belonged to you. Then she slid the key toward him. It scraped lightly over the polished wood. That sound stayed with me longer than anything she said next. Jason explained that my parents had signed a trustee's deed transferring the house from the Mercer family residence trust to him. He had recorded it Friday afternoon. A lender was prepared to use the property as collateral for a consolidated business loan. After the refinancing, he intended to renovate the kitchen and eventually help me find a smaller place. I asked for a copy of the deed. He produced one from a leather folder. The recorder's stamp was visible at the top. My parents' signatures had been notarized by someone named Melissa Grant. I recognized the document type immediately. It looked official. That did not mean it was authorized. I turned to my father. Did Rebecca prepare this? He rubbed his thumb against the edge of his plate. Rebecca retired. Did another trust attorney review it? Jason answered for him. A real estate document service prepared it. It's straightforward. It is not straightforward. The trust restricts transfers. My mother's voice sharpened. We created the trust. We can decide what happens to our house. It is not legally your house to distribute however you wish. You are trustees. You have duties to both beneficiaries. Jason gave a tired laugh. There she goes. 30 years behind a counter and suddenly she's a judge. Hannah said, Dad, let her finish. He turned to her. This is not your concern. It becomes my concern when you use Grandma and Grandpa's house to cover your company debt. My mother interrupted. No one is using anyone. Jason is building something. Claire is occupying something. To her, his risk was productive and my stability was passive. My payments, care, and obligations had disappeared from the story. My father pushed the white envelope toward me. Inside was a notice drafted in plain language. It said Jason was the new owner and expected possession within 30 days. It offered $5,000 for moving expenses if I left peacefully and signed a document relinquishing any claimed rights of occupancy. That phrase mattered. If they truly believed the deed had erased my rights, why did they need me to relinquish them? I asked Jason that question. He looked at my mother before answering. The lender wants clean paperwork. What lender? That's confidential. What closing date? May 9th. Has the title company reviewed the trust? His expression changed. Barely. But I saw it. They have what they need, he said. Hannah leaned toward me. Aunt Claire, don't sign anything. My mother said, Hannah, stop making this dramatic. I folded the notice beside my plate. The records clerk in me wanted the full document chain, the daughter in me wanted one parent to say the announcement had gone too far. Neither did. Instead, my mother said, you have a pension. You have savings. Jason has employees depending on him. I answered, and if I refuse? Jason's voice softened, which made it more threatening. Then we handle it formally. My father finally looked at me. Claire, please don't turn this into a war. I had prevented family wars by surrendering weekends, money, apologies, and uncomfortable facts. That night, I did something different. I stood, carried my plate to the sink, thanked my mother for dinner, and left without signing. Hannah followed me into the parking lot. Dad has been meeting with a lender for weeks, she said. I heard him say the house would be free and clear once you were out. Did he mention the trust? He said Grandma and Grandpa could amend it because they made it. They cannot amend my occupancy interest without my written consent. Are you certain? I looked at the envelope in my hand. I was certain 7 years ago. That answer frightened me more than I admitted. When I reached Maple Street, the back door was unlocked. Nothing appeared stolen. The ceramic bowl sat on the counter, but the spare key was gone. On the dining table, one drawer had been left partly open. Inside, I kept tax receipts, insurance policies, and my copy of the trust. The green binder was missing. I called Jason. He answered after 4 rings. Did you take my trust binder? It's not your trust. That was my copy, in my house. He sighed. Mom asked me to collect family documents. You'll get whatever you're entitled to. You entered without permission. I had a key. You took the key. Claire, you're making this uglier than it needs to be. I ended the call and changed the locks the next morning. At 11, my mother left a voicemail accusing me of shutting the family out of its own property. At noon, Jason sent a text saying the lock change proved I was acting in bad faith. At 2, Hannah sent me a photograph. It showed a stack of papers on Jason's office desk. On top was a document titled Consent and Renunciation of Occupancy Interest. Beneath my typed name was an empty signature line. The photo had been taken 6 weeks earlier. The betrayal had not begun at Sunday dinner. The dinner was only the moment they expected me to accept it. The details that didn't make sense. On Monday morning, I drove to the recorder's office where I had spent most of my adult life. I had retired 18 months earlier, but the security guard still greeted me by name. I used a public terminal because I did not want anyone accessing records as a favor. The trustee's deed had been recorded at 3:42 p.m. on April 11th. It transferred the Maple Street property to Jason Mercer for love and affection and other valuable consideration. My parents had signed as co-trustees. The deed referenced the Mercer family residence trust by date but did not attach or quote any trustee authority. That omission did not automatically invalidate it. County recorders do not interpret private trusts. If a deed meets formatting and acknowledgement requirements, it is generally recorded. The legal effect is a different question. I printed the deed and the prior transfer into the trust. Then I searched the county system for new mortgages in Jason's name. Nothing had been recorded yet. That gave me time. At home, I opened the fireproof box in my bedroom closet. I kept original insurance documents there. Mark's death certificate, and a sealed envelope Rebecca Shaw had mailed after the trust signing. I had forgotten what was inside. It contained a certified copy of the trust. The green binder had never held the only copy. I sat at the kitchen table and read every page. Not the summary. Not the highlighted sections. Every page. Article 4 established my lifetime occupancy after my parents permanently vacated. Article 5 named Jason as remainder beneficiary. Article 7 described trustee powers. Article 9 addressed amendment and termination. The sentence I remembered appeared near the bottom of page 11. No amendment, conveyance, mortgage, pledge, lease exceeding 1 year, or other encumbrance affecting the resident's beneficiary's right of occupancy shall be valid without the resident's beneficiaries' prior written consent. Resident's beneficiary was defined as me. Prior written consent did not exist. But I kept reading because one sentence alone would not solve every problem. My parents might argue that they had not intended to affect my right, only the underlying title. Jason might claim he took the property subject to my occupancy. The lender might still attempt to close around the dispute. Then I found a second provision in the trustee powers section. Any transferee of the residence was deemed to take subject to the occupancy interest unless the beneficiary executed a recorded renunciation. That explained the consent form on Jason's desk. The deed had not erased my right. It had transferred whatever interest the trust could lawfully convey. Burdened by my lifetime occupancy. A lender seeking first position collateral would not accept that uncertainty. Why, then, had Jason given me 30 days? Because he needed me to believe the deed was stronger than the trust. I called Rebecca's old firm. She had retired to Asheville but consulted on legacy files. The receptionist said she could schedule a video conference for Wednesday. Before the meeting, I organized evidence by ownership, occupancy, payments, communications, and consent. I printed tax and insurance records, repair invoices, Jason's texts, and Hannah's photograph. At 4:18 that afternoon, someone knocked hard on my front door. Jason stood on the porch with a man carrying a camera and a laser measuring device. "This is Todd," Jason said. "He's doing the lender inspection." "I did not authorize an inspection." "You don't own the house." "I have exclusive occupancy, and the transfer is disputed." Todd shifted his equipment case. "Maybe I should come back." Jason stepped closer. "May 9th is not moving. If you block access, I'll document it." "So will I." I held up my phone and began recording from inside my doorway. Ohio law permits a participant to record a conversation. I did not hide what I was doing. Jason lowered his voice. "You are going to cost people their jobs over a technicality. A lifetime occupancy right is not a technicality. You already got more than your share. What share? The house. Free rent for years. Mom and Dad carrying you after Mark died. That version of history was so polished that I knew he had repeated it often. I paid $68,000 toward their mortgage, I said. I paid the taxes. I paid for the furnace. I provided care. And you lived there. Yes. Under the agreement all of us signed. He stared past me into the hallway. You always keep score. No. I keep records. You only call it scorekeeping when the records stop you. Todd left without entering. That evening, my father called. Jason says you embarrassed him in front of the inspector. He brought an inspector to my home without notice. It is his property now. Did you read page 11 before signing the deed? Silence. Then he said, your mother handled the trust details. Did she read it? We were told we had authority as trustees. By whom? He did not answer. I asked whether Jason had shown them my unsigned consent form. My father breathed slowly into the phone. He said it was routine. Did he tell you the loan could not close without my signature? He said the lender preferred it. Preferred is not the word. My father sounded tired. Claire, what do you want? The question hurt because the answer had been written for 7 years. I want the agreement you signed to be honored. You know your brother is in trouble. I offered to review his finances. He refused. He feels judged by you. And I feel displaced by all of you. My father did not apologize. He asked me to meet as a family before involving lawyers. I agreed, but I set one condition: everyone would receive the same documents in advance. On Tuesday morning, I emailed my parents, Jason and Hannah, a scanned copy of the trust with the relevant provisions highlighted. I included the recorded deed, the payment records, and a one-page proposal. My proposal was more generous than Hannah thought it should be. I offered Jason a secured $45,000 family loan at 3% over 10 years. In exchange, he would return title to the trust, abandon the house as collateral, cover document costs, and acknowledge my lifetime occupancy. My parents could remain trustees if they used independent counsel for future transfers. I was not trying to punish him. I was trying to save the house and give him a path that did not require humiliating anyone. Hannah called within 10 minutes. 45,000? She said. After he broke into your house? He used a stolen key. I don't know whether a prosecutor would call it breaking in. You're doing it again. Doing what? Making his behavior smaller so you can keep helping. I looked at the brass key in the photograph from dinner. Jason still had it, but it no longer opened my door. I need to know I offered something fair, I said. For him or for you? For me. The family meeting took place Wednesday afternoon at my parents' condominium. Jason arrived with the green binder he had taken from my house. He placed it on the coffee table as though returning it were an act of generosity. My mother did not touch my proposal. This loan amount is insulting, she said. $45,000 is not an insult. Jason needs at least $200,000 to stabilize the company. Then the company is not stable enough to secure with my home. Jason said the house was not mine. I opened the trust to page 11. My occupancy interest is mine. You signed that. He leaned back. An interest is not ownership. No. But it prevents the loan you want unless I consent. My father looked at him. Is that true? Jason answered too quickly. The lender has options. What options? I asked. He ignored me. My mother said, we can amend the trust. I pointed to the same sentence. Not as to my occupancy without my prior written consent. She read it silently, then said, that cannot be what Rebecca intended. It is what she wrote, explained, and had all of us sign. My father turned the page back and forth, as if the sentence might move. For a moment, I thought the facts had reached him. Then Jason said, Claire is using one line to hold the entire family hostage. My mother nodded. That was the phrase they chose. Hostage. Not beneficiary. Not contributor. Not daughter. I asked whether Jason would accept my proposal. No, he said. You will sign the renunciation, or I'll remove you through court. On what basis? Waste. Unauthorized lock changes. Obstruction of trustee access. Whatever applies. My father flinched at the word court. I closed the binder. Then my offer expires Friday at 5. My mother stood. You would let your brother lose everything. I stood too. No. I am refusing to let him lose my home. On the way out, my father followed me into the hall. Your mother is frightened, he said. So am I. She thinks Jason's company is the only thing that can support us if our savings run low. I have managed your bills for 12 years. I know what you have. You are not facing immediate ruin. He says medical costs could change everything. Then we make a care plan. We do not mortgage Maple Street to rescue a failing business. My father looked older than he had at dinner. Could you sign something temporary? He asked. There is no temporary surrender of a lifetime right. He lowered his voice. Your mother will never forgive you. I answered, she has not asked whether I will forgive her. The deadline passed Friday without acceptance. At 5:12 p.m., Jason emailed one sentence. Proceed accordingly. The truth I could no longer ignore. Rebecca Shaw appeared on my laptop screen the following Monday from a study lined with books. Her hair was white now, but her voice had not changed. She listened without interrupting while I described the deed. The lender inspection, the missing binder, and the demand that I leave. Then she asked me to hold the certified trust close to the camera. Page 11, she said. I showed her the consent provision. Yes, she said. That is the line I was looking for. Relief came first. Then shame, because I had needed a lawyer to confirm something I had understood all along. Rebecca explained that the deed created a title problem, not a clean transfer. My parents could act only within the trust. Without my written consent, the transaction could be challenged as a breach, and Jason would at minimum hold title subject to my lifetime occupancy. A prudent lender would not treat that as clean collateral. But prudent does not mean automatic, she warned. You need to give formal notice before anyone claims. They relied on incomplete information. She recommended a local trust litigator, Denise Holloway, and offered to provide an affidavit about the drafting history. She also told me something I had avoided considering. Claire, your parents may not have misunderstood the trust, she said. They may have understood enough to know they needed your signature and chosen to proceed anyway. I wanted to defend them. I said Jason had probably pressured them. That may be true, Rebecca replied. Pressure and responsibility can exist at the same time. Denise met with me the next day. She was 50, direct, and careful about promises. She did not say we would win. She said the documents gave us a strong basis to seek cancellation of the deed, enforcement of my occupancy, an accounting from the trustees, and reimbursement of legal costs if the breach was proven. She also explained what would not happen. The deed would not vanish after one letter, and no judge would punish everyone before May 9th. We had to prevent irreversible harm while preserving settlement. That realism made me trust her. Denise notified my parents, Jason, the lender, and the title company. She attached the trust provisions, stated that I had never consented, and demanded that closing pause until title was resolved. The lender responded the same afternoon. It did not admit any problem. It said the file was under legal review. The title company requested the complete trust, all amendments, and any signed occupancy waiver. Jason called me at 7:30 that night. You contacted my bank. My attorney notified a lender that my home was being offered as collateral without my consent. You sabotaged the loan. The trust terms existed before your application. You could fix this with one signature. So could you, by returning the property to the trust. He told me the business would collapse if the closing failed. I asked for his current balance sheet and lender term sheet so we could discuss another rescue plan. Stop asking for my private records. You are asking me to risk my residence for those records. You don't understand business. I understand collateral. He hung up. 2 days later, Hannah brought me the brass key from Jason's desk. I told her to return it. Taking things. Because you think you're right is how this started, I said. She returned it the next morning. I wanted the outcome to come from documents and boundaries, not from matching Jason's behavior. The next development came from my father. He arrived alone on Saturday, using the front doorbell instead of a key. I let him in. He touched Mark's old chair and the trim he had installed 40 years earlier. We spoke like strangers, waiting for the real conversation. Finally, he said, Jason told us the transfer could happen as long as you kept living here. That is partly true. He could receive a future interest subject to my occupancy. But he told the bank the house would be free and clear once I left. He said you had already agreed to downsize. I never agreed. My father sat at the dining table. Your mother believed you would sign after we made the decision. Because I usually do what keeps everyone calm. He did not deny it. I showed him Hannah's photograph of the renunciation form dated 6 weeks before dinner. I showed him Jason's email insisting the lender had options, the inspection attempt, and the title company's request for my waiver. My father read everything twice. Then he said, your mother knew about the form. There it was. Not one misunderstanding. Not one hurried signature. Not one missing explanation. They had known my consent was necessary. They had simply expected to obtain it after announcing that. The choice was already made. Did you know? I asked. He rubbed both hands over his face. I knew Jason wanted you to sign something. I did not know he had prepared it before we transferred the house. Did you ask? No. That answer was more honest than an excuse. Jason had promised to refinance, repay a $30,000 parental loan, and support them monthly. My mother had begun treating that promise as retirement income. The house was also being used to avoid admitting how much they had already risked on him. I asked how much they had given him in total. My father said he was not sure. Their statements showed $18,000 labeled home repairs, $9,000 to a vendor at Jason's showroom address, and 6 monthly transfers of $1,500. The total was at least $56,000 beyond the $30,000 loan my father mentioned. He stared at the screen. Elaine handled those, he said. My mother had not only preferred Jason. She had concealed the scale of her support from my father and then tried to turn my home into the final rescue. Beneath my anger was grief. My mother had not overlooked my competence, she had counted on it as a resource that would always remain available. My father asked whether I would still lend Jason $45,000. The offer expired. Could you renew it? Only if the deed is returned, the lender application is withdrawn, and you and Mom provide a complete accounting of trust activity. He winced at the word accounting. Your mother will see that as humiliation. An accounting is what trustees owe beneficiaries. He left without committing. That night, my mother called and accused me of interrogating my father while he was vulnerable. She said I had always been jealous of Jason's confidence. She said I was using legal language to punish a family that had taken me in after Mark died. I let her finish. Then I said, I helped save that house before the trust existed. I cared for you in it. I paid to maintain it after you left. You promised me the right to remain, and you tried to remove me because you thought I would be too afraid of losing you to object. She answered, if you loved us, you would not make us choose between our children. You already chose. You are asking me not to name it. She hung up. I understood that family peace now required accepting a false story. My security was negotiable, and Jason's plans were not. That was a price I could no longer pay. The line I finally drew. Denise filed a petition in probate court seeking instructions to the trustees, confirmation of my occupancy, interest, and cancellation or limitation of the deed. At the same time, she asked the court for a temporary order preventing Jason from mortgaging or selling the property while the case was pending. The hearing was scheduled for May 6, 3 days before the proposed loan closing. My family reacted as though the filing itself were the betrayal. My mother sent an email to relatives saying I was suing my elderly parents for their house. Jason told Hannah I had frozen a legitimate business transaction out of spite. An aunt called and suggested I move into an apartment because no building is worth losing your family. I asked whether Jason's business was worth losing me. She changed the subject. Denise advised me not to argue through relatives. We would answer in documents. She requested the trust's bank records, any amendments, the deed preparation file, and communications with the lender. My parents initially produced only the green binder and a one-page trustee certificate. The certificate stated they had unrestricted authority to transfer trust assets. That language appeared broad, but it was not the whole trust. A certification cannot erase limitations in the document it summarizes. The title company understood that. On April 30th, it issued a written exception stating that it could not insure the proposed mortgage as a first lien unless my occupancy interest was released or a court determined it did not apply. Jason forwarded the letter to me with one line, "You happy now?" I did not answer. The same day, my father called Denise and asked about settlement. We met at her office on May 2nd. My parents sat together on one side of the conference table. Jason sat beside them. I sat across from all three with Denise. I brought the brass key. Hannah had returned it to Jason, and he had mailed it to me with a note saying I might as well keep it for now. I placed it beside my folder, not as evidence, but as a reminder not to confuse possession with permission. Denise presented a revised settlement. The deed would be corrected so title returned to the trust. My parents would resign as trustees, and a neutral corporate trustee would be appointed. I would retain lifetime occupancy under the original terms. Jason would retain his remainder interest, meaning he could still receive the house after my death or voluntary departure. I would not pursue damages for the unauthorized entry or seek surcharge against my parents, provided they reimbursed only the direct recording and title expenses. I would also contribute $25,000, not $45,000, to a structured workout plan if Jason disclosed his financial records and an independent accountant concluded the business could survive. It was still a fair offer. Jason barely looked at it. A bank trustee will charge fees for years, he said. That is the cost of removing family pressure from trust decisions, Denise replied. My mother said resigning would make them look incompetent. I said, you transferred the primary trust asset in violation of a restriction you signed. We were helping our son, she answered. You have 2 children. My father stared at the proposal. Jason keeps the remainder? Yes, Denise said. Claire is not asking to rewrite the inheritance. Jason leaned forward. She is making sure I cannot use it while it matters. It was never available for your business, I said. That is one interpretation. It is one sentence. My mother told Denise she wanted to speak to me alone. Denise asked whether I agreed. I did. We moved to a smaller room. My mother remained standing. When you were little, she said, you followed every rule. You made your brother feel like he was always doing something wrong. I was 5 years older. I took care of him. You corrected him. Sometimes. He has spent his life trying to prove he is not less capable than you. I had never heard her describe the pattern so clearly. She believed Jason's entitlement was compensation for my competence. So I am supposed to surrender my home to protect his confidence? He is trying to build a legacy. I am trying to keep a roof. You could buy another roof. Then why can't he find other collateral? She looked at me with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Because this is what family property is for. No. This is what you decided I am for. Her expression changed. I continued before fear could stop me. I will not sign the renunciation. I will not leave. I will not lend money unless the deed is corrected and an accountant reviews the business. I will not discuss the case through relatives. And no one enters Maple Street without my permission. My mother said I sounded cold. I am being clear. Clarity without compassion is cruelty. Compassion without limits is permission. She left the room. The settlement was rejected. At the temporary order hearing, the judge did not decide the entire case. He did something narrower and more realistic. He reviewed the trust, the deed, the consent provision, and my affidavit that I had never agreed to release occupancy. He prohibited any mortgage, sale, eviction, or further transfer until the dispute was resolved. He ordered the trustees to provide a full accounting and scheduled mediation for June. Jason's May 9th closing was cancelled. His lender did not accuse me of anything. It simply withdrew the commitment because acceptable title could not be delivered by the deadline. 3 days later, Jason's commercial landlord locked him out of the second showroom for unpaid rent. My mother called and said, "You knew this would happen. I knew the loan might fail. You destroyed his company." No. His company was already unable to meet its obligations. Do you hear yourself? You sound pleased. I was not pleased. I was sick with guilt, though I knew the guilt had been cultivated for years. Every consequence of Jason's decisions was being carried to my doorstep and labeled mine. That evening, I nearly called Denise and told her to offer the $45,000 again with no accountant. I had the phone in my hand when Hannah arrived. She placed a cardboard box on my table. It contained old invoices from Jason's business, mailed to her address because he had once used it for company registration. She said a supplier had contacted her, looking for him. "I think you need to see the dates," she said. The unpaid balances began 9 months before Jason first asked about borrowing against the house. He had known the second showroom was failing long before he told my parents he faced a temporary cash problem. He had continued taking deposits from customers while delaying existing projects. He had also paid himself a $60,000 owner distribution the previous summer. That money was not proof of fraud. It did not tell us where every dollar went. But it disproved the story that one unexpected setback had created the crisis. Jason had not asked for a bridge. He had asked for the house to cover a pattern. I put down the phone. The day everything changed. Mediation took place on June 18 in a conference center near the courthouse. By then, the trust accounting had revealed the full extent of the problem. My parents had transferred $83,000 to Jason over 2 years. $30,000 was documented as a loan. The rest had been recorded in their personal notes as gifts, advances, or family support. None of it came directly from the residence trust, but the payments explained why they had become emotionally dependent on his refinancing plan. If his business failed, they would have to admit the money was unlikely to return. The deed preparation service produced its file under subpoena. Its intake form contained a question asking whether any beneficiary held a right of occupancy. Jason had checked no. Below that, he had certified that the information was accurate to the best of his knowledge. He later claimed he misunderstood the question. That was possible. It was also difficult to reconcile with the renunciation form he had prepared 6 weeks earlier. The lender produced an email in which Jason described me as a temporary resident who has agreed to relocate after closing. No such agreement existed. Those documents did not transform him into a cartoon villain. They showed something more ordinary and more dangerous. He had convinced himself that the outcome he wanted was already morally justified, so the details required to reach it became flexible. The mediator was a retired judge named Samuel Price. He met with each side separately, then brought us together for a final session. My parents looked exhausted. My father had lost weight. My mother wore the pearl necklace she chose for serious occasions. Jason had no sport coat this time. His second showroom was closed, and his first was operating with 3 employees instead of 11. The mediator placed the trust at the center of the table. There is substantial disagreement about intent, he said. There is much less disagreement about text. Jason's attorney argued that my parents, as settlers and trustees, had intended to retain broad control and that the transfer could be interpreted as subject to my occupancy rather than void. Denise agreed that a court might distinguish between title and occupancy, but she noted that Jason's proposed mortgage required my removal and that the deed had been executed as part of a plan to obtain unencumbered collateral. The mediator asked my father why the family had not simply transferred the remainder interest while leaving me in place. My father answered, the bank would not lend enough. That was the truth in one sentence. The plan had always required my right to disappear. The mediator opened to page 11 and read aloud. No amendment, conveyance, mortgage, pledge, lease exceeding 1 year, or other encumbrance affecting the resident's beneficiary's right of occupancy shall be valid without the resident's beneficiary's prior written consent. He looked at my parents. Did Claire provide prior written consent? My father said no. My mother said, we believed she would. Belief is not consent. Then he looked at Jason. Did your lender require her to vacate or renounce? Jason's attorney answered that the loan file spoke for itself. The mediator closed the trust. That was the moment the deed lost its power over the room. Not because paper magically defeated people, but because every explanation finally had to pass through the same line. My parents could say they meant well. Jason could say the family needed the money. I could admit that I had benefited from living in the house. None of those arguments supplied the missing signature. Denise presented our final proposal. It was similar to the earlier settlement but no longer included financial assistance for Jason's company. The deed would be cancelled by agreed court order. A professional trustee would replace my parents. My occupancy would continue under the trust. Jason would retain his remainder interest, but he would reimburse $12,400 in title, inspection, and legal expenses over 3 years. My parents would not be personally surcharged if they completed the accounting and resigned. All parties would release claims arising from the attempted transfer, except obligations under the settlement. Jason objected to paying expenses. Hannah, who had attended with his permission, spoke for the first time. "Dad, Aunt Claire offered you $45,000 before any of this," she said. "Then 25. You said no because you wanted the house. You need to stop acting like the only unfair thing is the consequence." My mother told her not to disrespect her father. Hannah answered, "I'm trying to get him to survive this without losing everyone." Jason stared at the table. The mediator asked whether he understood that if the case continued, he could spend far more than $12,000 and still end up with a deed subject to my lifetime occupancy. He also explained that the lender documents and intake form created risks neither side could predict with certainty. After another hour, Jason agreed. My father signed first. His hand shook. My mother read every page and stopped at the resignation clause. "This means strangers control the family home," she said. I answered, "It means no child has to fight a parent over it again." She looked at me for a long time. Then she signed. Jason signed last. The agreed order was entered 2 weeks later. The trustee's deed to Jason was cancelled. Northfield Trust Company accepted appointment as independent trustee. The title record was corrected. My lifetime occupancy remained exactly what it had been before Sunday dinner. No one applauded. There was no dramatic confession. The courthouse clerk stamped the order, and Denise handed me a certified copy. Outside, my father asked whether he could visit Maple Street sometime. "Call first," I said. My mother walked past me without speaking. Jason stopped near the elevator. "You got what you wanted," he said. "I wanted you to accept the first offer." He looked away. That money would not have saved the business. Then the house would not have saved it either. He did not answer. When I returned home, I found the brass key on the kitchen counter where I had left it before mediation. I removed the blue tag my father had written on and placed the key in the green trust binder. It no longer opened the lock. It had become evidence of a belief that holding something meant you had the right to decide its use. I closed the binder and put it in the fireproof box. For the first time in months, the house felt quiet rather than threatened. What remained afterward? Consequences arrived slowly, which is how they usually arrive in real families. Jason did not lose everything in 1 week. He negotiated a repayment plan with 2 suppliers, closed the second showroom permanently, and sold his truck. 3 employees remained. The company became smaller and less impressive, but it survived. Hannah helped him find a financial counselor on the condition that she would not co-sign, lend money, or receive company mail. He blamed me for several months. Then his anger became silence. We did not speak until Thanksgiving, when he called to ask whether I still had our father's old table saw in the garage. I said yes. He asked to borrow it for a paid job. I told him he could pick it up Saturday and return it by Monday. There was a pause. "You need that in writing?" he asked. "No. I need you to return it." He did. That was not reconciliation. It was a small action completed as promised. I learned not to inflate it into more. My father visited Maple Street twice that summer. The first time, he stood on the porch until I invited him in. We walked through the garden, where the tomato plants had grown higher than the fence. He apologized. Without defending himself. I let fear make your mother's decisions sound reasonable, he said. And I let your reliability become an excuse not to protect you. I accepted the apology, but I did not erase what had happened. Trust is not restored by one accurate sentence. It is restored, if at all, by a pattern that follows. My mother did not visit. She sent birthday cards with only her name. When my father developed heart rhythm problems in October, I drove him to 2 appointments because he asked and because I wanted to. I did not resume managing their finances. Northfield Trust handled the residents. A fee-only advisor reviewed their retirement accounts. Jason was not permitted to borrow from them without written documentation. My mother called that arrangement humiliating. I called it protection. Our relationship remained damaged. We spoke every few weeks about practical matters. She never said the transfer was wrong. Her closest approach came one evening when she said, "I suppose we assumed you would land on your feet." I answered, "People use that phrase when they have pushed someone." She became quiet. I did not press for more. Hannah continued visiting on Sundays. She helped me repaint the downstairs den, the same room I had converted for my father after his hip surgery. We chose a soft green. I turned it into a reading room instead of a bedroom for whoever might need me next. That change mattered. For years, every spare room in my life had been reserved for another person's emergency. The den had held medical equipment, Jason's business files, my mother's holiday storage, and Hannah's college furniture. Making it mine felt almost selfish. I kept doing it anyway. Northfield Trust sent quarterly statements. At first, I resented paying a professional fee for something my family should have managed honestly. Then I noticed what the fee purchased: no midnight pressure, no missing pages, no private promise that changed the meaning of a signed document. When the roof needed gutter work, I submitted the estimate, received approval, and paid my share under the trust. The process was boring. Boring became a luxury. The house itself changed in small ways. I replaced the back door lock Jason had tried to use with a keypad. I planted a dogwood where an old maple had died. I put Mark's photograph on the mantel after years of keeping it in a drawer because my mother said memorial pictures made a room sad. The green trust binder remained in the fireproof box. Once a year, I took it out, reviewed the statements, and checked the recorded title online. I did not do that because I expected another betrayal. I did it because vigilance is different from fear when it has a schedule. A year after the mediation, my father asked me to bring the binder to the condominium. My mother was there, sitting by the window with a blanket over her knees. Jason arrived separately. Hannah came too. My father said he wanted everyone to understand the trust as it now stood. He asked me to read the occupancy clause aloud. I hesitated. Then I opened to page 11. The same sentence that had once felt like a weapon now sounded like a boundary established by people who had known their future selves might be frightened, pressured, or persuaded. The trust did not assume our family would always behave wisely. It created a rule for the moment we did not. When I finished, my father said, "We should have listened the first time." My mother looked at the brass key resting inside the binder pocket. "Why do you keep that?" she asked. Because it reminds me that access and ownership are not the same thing. Jason gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. Message received. I closed the binder. No one apologized perfectly. No one returned to the people we had been before the dinner. My parents still loved Jason with a softness they rarely offered me. Jason still believed I could have helped him more. My mother still treated the professional trustee as proof that I had brought outsiders into private family matters. But the house was secure. More importantly, I had stopped making my place in the family dependent on how much instability I could absorb. I used to think the lesson was that documents protect people. They can. A recorded trust, a cancelled deed. A written consent requirement, those things mattered. But paper worked only because I was finally willing to let it mean what it said. For years, I had possessed evidence of my rights while behaving as though asserting them would make me unlovable. My parents did not miss the line merely because it was buried on page 11. They missed it because they had built their plan around an older version of me, the daughter who would read the truth, feel guilty, and sign anyway. That daughter was not weak. She had survived by being useful. She had held people together through grief, illness, debt, and disappointment. But survival skills can become cages when everyone benefits from you never changing. The final change was not that I won a house. The trust had already given me the right to remain. The change was that I stopped asking my family to agree that I deserved the protection before I used it. The brass key still sits in the green binder. It opens nothing now, and that is why I keep it. It reminds me that family can hand your life to someone else with great confidence, but confidence does not rewrite a promise. A home can shelter your body. A boundary shelters the part of you that has spent too long paying for peace. What would you have done in my place? Offered the family one last compromise, or let the trust speak from the beginning?